Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Teal Talks. I'm Chris. I use she, her pronouns.
And I am Holly. I also use she, her pronouns.
So last video, we talked a little bit about April being Sexual Assault Awareness Month and the theme of that month being safe online spaces. So today we want to talk a little bit about digital consent and how we can all be practicing that. So we know that now more than ever, people are of all ages are relying on technology to stay connected. So we're going to give you some kind of spaces where we see digital consent being pertinent and how we can be better at it and how we can be practicing it more often to make sure that we are getting active consent as we navigate these challenging and difficult times where social interactions have been replaced with a lot of digital interactions.
So one very basic way that you can be practicing consent is to quite literally check in with your friends, family, and loved ones about their comfortability, their kind of boundary around kind of sharing their information, their pictures, and their overall background or anything about them on social media. So before you tag them on a picture, before you upload that picture, before you're sharing locations, if you're making sure to check in with your partner or your friend and making sure that that's okay. I think that unfortunately some of us have that experience where you've been tagged in that not so flattering picture that you wish wasn't up on
Everybody's mom's Facebook.
Yeah, that's a very popular meme right now. And though we can laugh at it, it is unfortunate. We shouldn't ever have to face an experience where essentially our information is up there without our consent that we wouldn't want out there. So being the best friend, partner, and loved one that you can be, make sure that you're checking in with those around you to make sure that they are comfortable and as comfortable as you are with sharing everything that you're posting.
So another big one is sending nudes and / or sexting. So I actually think we're going to be doing another video specifically on this and the non-consensual sharing of images. But in this particular video, we're going to be talking about the consensual sharing of images. So with that being said, not everybody is comfortable with sending or receiving nudes, which is very important. So we need to keep that in mind. If you have a conversation with someone, which is an important piece of this, having a conversation, you should be determining with that person what you feel comfortable sending and receiving and vice versa. So making sure that you are very open and clear in what you are okay getting and what you are okay sending. And let's remember that consent and boundaries are fluid. So if at one point I say yes to this, but I later decide I actually don't want to do that, that's okay. Or if I say, hey, today I'm comfortable receiving or sending this, but tomorrow I change my mind and I say, actually, I'm not so comfortable with that, that's okay. We need to be respectful of people's limits and boundaries and their consent and how that changes. Affirmative consent is a really big piece of that. And again, we'll go into this a little bit more in another video because I think it could be its own video in and of itself. But a big piece of this is affirmative consent. So am I actively doing this because I want to do this and I want to send these pictures? Or do I feel like if I don't send these, this person might break up with me or they might not be interested in me, because that's not affirmative consent and that's not consent. With that being said, another big piece of this is what you do or what people will do with these images once they are received. So having a conversation about what to do with any of the photos that are sent and so on is really important to ensure people's safety, their comfortability, and just the limits that exist with sharing nude pictures or sexting. With that being said, we shouldn't be sharing anybody's pictures without their consent if we receive them. And that's a really important conversation to have with the person that you're sending them to. So what will you do with these once I send them to you? And making sure that there won't be any kind of like weaponizing of those pictures is really important.
Mm-hmm. And just to kind of feed off of another point that Chris was saying, with sending any kind of nude, lewd pictures or sexting, I think about that kind of rule with consent as well. Just because I say yes to one thing doesn't mean that I said yes to everything. So if I am consenting to sending you a picture, that doesn't mean that I'm consenting to you showing that picture to someone else. It doesn't mean that I'm consenting you to re-uploading that picture somewhere. And so we really need to make sure that that communication is open and those boundaries are set.
And I'm sorry, Hall, to cut you off, but you made me think of something in the midst of talking that we missed. I think it's also really important to remember the age of the parties involved. because nudes and sexting is really popular amongst teenagers, and some of those things could be considered child pornography, and those images should not be being shared. So again, another conversation for another video that we could get more in depth for that, for both teens, the safety of teens who might be doing those things, for adults who might be sending nudes and or sexting, and for parents who might have kids or loved ones or teens who are doing those things, so that they can be super informed and learn how to keep their loved ones safe and themselves safe.
And just as you made me think of something, then I made you think of something. I have one more thought. As we are talking in this video to an audience, we are kind of talking as if we're talking to our audience. But when I think about something, just as Chris mentioned, where we're talking about children and things like that, when it comes to topics like sending nudes, I think that it's really important, parents, again, to be having these conversations with your children, to be talking about this, to be talking about consent, and to be talking about particularly consent in terms of the digital age that we are now in, and what that looks like. And now more than ever, especially as things have kind of really curved online as we kind of navigated through that pandemic. So to quite kind of change gears, but not really, to say, as I was kind of mentioning before, I said that we've curved online, or whatever weird thing I managed to say, as I usually do. I think that it's really important to recognize, in general, within these past 10, 20 years, we've made a huge jump into the digital age. Now I'm gonna just age myself with a weird.
I literally thought you were gonna say COVID, and I was like, Holly, it has not been 10 or 20 years of COVID. I don't know where you are.
No. Just online. We're in the online era, but I'm switching there to switch back to say, within this past year, I think that we've been online in a way that we weren't before. Everyone essentially had to navigate this online world in a way that maybe we didn't, just because of this pandemic, and using, for us, telehealth like we hadn't before, doing things like video series and trainings, seeing your doctor online, going to school online. Everything is now in this online world. And because of that, the way that we communicate has really drastically changed. I think that it's really important to point that out and to recognize that communication online is a lot different than communication in person. Things like using body language and recognizing like consent through facial features, or not facial features, but nonverbal cues, essentially. We don't have that all the time. If you're talking to someone over the phone, you can't recognize that. If your computer's lagging, you don't have nonverbal cues. Woo! So I think that it's really, really important to be really open and clear with communication, and be creative with ways in which we talk about things like consent, because we can't always rely on just bodily consent either. And consent aside too, just recognizing that our communication with each other has changed drastically, because we are in an online environment now. And so it's really important to recognize those changes.
So to continue on with some other spheres and places where we might need to practice digital consent, sending a text to someone just to check in and see if they have a few minutes to talk, or even if they have half an hour to talk, whatever the time frame you're looking to connect for is, before you just call them or FaceTime them, can be a nice way just to get consent, especially because of us have changed so much, like in our schedules and the way that we do things. Working from home for some people has been really great, and for others has been really exhausting. So we're all learning new ways to self-care. And maybe I used to call my friend on my drive home from work every day, but now I'm not driving home from work and I'm feeling really exhausted. I don't really want to talk to them at 5 o'clock. So sending a friend or a loved one or a family member, whoever, just a text or something like that, even an email if it's a coworker, to say, hey, do you have 10 minutes to connect? And giving them that space to say, no, thank you, I'm not really feeling it right now. Or yeah, actually I do, give me a call. Or I don't have some time right now, but I do have some time around 5 today, if that works for you. can be really helpful in a really positive way to practice consent and digital consent, especially. So like I said, especially with FaceTime, a lot of us, again, working from home, might not be getting ready for a day, getting ready for work in the same way that we did before. I know on my days off, like I am just in my sweatpants and my PJs, or if in the morning I'm just doing some paperwork, I can shower a little later in the day. So if someone wants to FaceTime me and I haven't done that stuff yet, maybe I really don't want to FaceTime right now. But it's different for everybody and it changes. So just checking in and saying, hey, would you mind if I called, can be a good way just to get consent first.
Definitely. And just as Chris was saying, being home is kind of completely different. Being around your partner, your family, your sisters, brothers, whoever you're living with all the time, can really add a lot of tension and stress onto everyone. And so I think that it's really important to work with the people that you're living with, as well as identifying where you are at and what your needs are. So I know for a lot of people who are living in apartments or don't necessarily have extra bedrooms or something, it's important to recognize when you need space, if you need to go for a walk alone, because everyone sometimes just needs time to themselves. And in this pandemic, we haven't always had time to ourselves. But when we're considering digital space, sometimes when we're working, we also need that digital space. And when you are with a partner or a family member all the time, it can be really frustrating and hard to be able to get that space that you need. So I think it's really important to have that open communication with those that you're with and your loved ones in order to be able to talk out your needs at this time. So making sure that you're using those I statements and discussing what your needs are right now and coming from that place of care and love and support, but recognizing that right now we're all trying to navigate this time still as well.
And I think something that's really important, like, and Hall, I don't know about you, but I get asked this a lot. Like, what do I do for self-care? I get asked this by other people, system partners, clients. And I think it's really important for us to model some of that too, because we're human. We have to take care of ourselves as well, just as everybody else does. And for me, like, I know something I really like to do to decompress is on my drive home, listen to music, listen to a crime podcast. I know it doesn't sound like self-care. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's what I enjoy. And that's how I kind of wind down from my day. So if I don't have that commute home from work and my partner's home and I just ended my day, but I still need that time to decompress, I have to find some time and space to do that in other ways. So using I statements, like Holly mentioned, a good example might be like, hey, I'd really love to spend some time with you, but I had an exhausting day today and I just need some time to decompress. This is what's really helpful for me. And doing that can kind of help people to not feel like it's personal, to not feel like there's something wrong with me. It's just about kind of setting boundaries and limits that are helpful for us so that we are making sure that we take care of ourselves. So all of this stuff in mind, remembering that everybody's limits and boundaries are different and should be respected is super important. So what Holly's boundaries and limits are might look different from what mine are. And honestly, they might change day to day. So consent is kind of evolving, especially in the age of COVID. And these are just some ways in which consent has evolved in the digital world that COVID kind of like pushed us to acknowledge in a lot of ways. These are things we maybe really hadn't considered before or hadn't considered as heavily as we do now because we weren't using social media or telehealth or virtual communication as much as we are now. So we really appreciate you all listening. I will not steal Holly's outro and let her tell you all about what you all know if you have watched our videos that she will say, but thanks for tuning in and I will pass the mic.
And thank you all, as always, for watching. If you have any future suggestions for topics for this month or future, I was going to say episodes, but they're really just videos, please leave those suggestions in the comments below. As we had mentioned in our last video, this month is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and our theme is building safe online spaces. So we would love to hear your input on our theme, your input on this particular video, and any kind of ongoing input and suggestions for that theme and for videos in the future. And as always, Thank you.
Oh, I cut Kelly off. I wasn't going to say, as always, thank you. I was just going to say, check out our last video for information about upcoming events. There's still time to register for a lot of those. And also head over to nsvrc.org for more information on Sexual Assault Awareness Month and more information on digital consent and what we've talked about today. Thanks,
and
everyone.
You can also check out the PCAR website and sarcc.org.
Bye.